Good evening and welcome to Children First. This is a program we bring you each month through Maryville Academy and Cable Access Network Television. Tonight, I am Sister Catherine Ryan. I am delighted to be introducing to you our State's Attorney of Cook County, Anita Alvarez. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you, Sister.
And Anita, would you begin by telling our audience a little bit about your background? I think they'd like to know about how you came to be an attorney and about your family.
Okay. I was born and raised here in Chicago, and I grew up not far from where we're at now in the Pilsen neighborhood. And I come from very humble beginnings. My dad came here, worked as a waiter. My mom didn't work until he passed away, and she was a seamstress. So she supported us by working in a factory sewing clothes. So I come from very humble beginnings, but education was something that was very important to my mom. And so she made sure all of us went to school. But I was the first in my family to graduate from college, and I went to Loyola and majored in social work. And I think the real reason was I felt I wanted a job where I felt I was really helping people. And law school for me really was not my first choice. It was kind of a last-minute decision.
Really?
It really was. I'm not one of those people that said I wanted to be a lawyer since I was a child. So I ended up in law school, though, and the rest is history. I made it through and started in the state's attorney's office as a young assistant, and I think I chose the right profession, and I think it's a way in the state's attorney's office because of what we do. We help victims. That's why we're there. We are helping children and family and victims of violent crime each and every day. So I think it's a good combination of my undergraduate degree and my law degree, and I just love it. I love this position. I love being able to help people and through some very hard times.
How many years were you in the office before you were assistant? You were actually the state's attorney.
Actually, I just celebrated my 25 years in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office.
Congratulations.
So I started right out of law school in 1986, and then 2007 is when I decided to run and enter that field of politics, which I was never in before. But even though running for election is a whole different field, so to speak, the job itself I absolutely love. So it's like one of those things you have to do in order to attain the position, but I love it. And I think every day there's a challenge, each and every day when we're out there, but we're doing some great, exciting things in the office, so I feel like I've just begun.
Well, I'm going to ask you about those exciting things.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'd like to just add a personal note. I had the pleasure of working with you, Anita, in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office until I was invited to Maryville Academy in 2004. And so I can attest to our viewers how much compassion and confidence Anita brings to cases of many victims, but my personal interest was in how she worked with children and their families. And so I'm delighted that tonight, Anita, you're going to be able to talk about some of the ways the State's Attorney's Office helps families, both the children and adults, in some of your programs. Let me ask you, I know that you just began a new program in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. I think our viewers would be delighted to know something about your new adult diversion program.
Oh, absolutely. We're very excited about our new adult diversion program. And Sister, it was looking at what we do on the juvenile side, and that is to divert kids out of the system to try to get them the help that they need. The question arose really when I was campaigning, and I would go to different communities, and people would ask me, do you have anything like that on the adult side? And really, we don't, with the exception of drug school. We really didn't have a program developed for that sort of thing. So this is a program that we've been developing for about 18 months, and we started it on March 1st of this year, and already we have approximately 150 participants. Wow. And the program is very specific, and it's for first-time offenders on the adult side on a non-violent case. That they have no background, and it kind of works the way we were doing things over in juvenile, and that is like for example, if it's a burglary, the victim of that burglary has to agree to put the offender in that particular program. And what it does is that puts this person on really what is an intensive probation period for a year. A lot of restrictions, a lot of reporting, but if they complete it successfully, then the case will be dismissed, outright dismissed. So the person avoids the felony conviction, because what we've seen, and I've been a state's attorney a long time, and I've certainly have seen, there is a group of offenders that they're not hardcore violent offenders, and so do they deserve a second chance? Sure they do, because what we've seen is there's been some young people who have tried to apply to the military, but because of their felony conviction, they don't get accepted, or they go to college, they try to apply for student loans, and they can't get them. So this program will allow that group of, that certain group of kids, or young adults, I'll say, the opportunity to get back on track and avoid the felony conviction, and hopefully that'll help them as they move on in life to get a job, to go into the military, go to school.
That's exciting. And this would be individuals 18 and older.
Yes, this is on the adult side now, not the juvenile side. So,
Right.
Again, we're overwhelmed by the amount of people who are agreeing to do the program, and again, the victims are agreeing as well. So we'll see. Hopefully, a year from now, we'll have some success stories, because we're just been up and running now 2.5 months.
Well, that's great news. Less than 90 days, 150 people.
Right.
And I want to just tell our viewers that you can call in and ask questions. So let me show you the number. The Chicago Area Network Television Hotline 21. The call number is 312-738-1060. So if you want to call in with your questions or comments, we'd welcome that for our Cook County State's Attorney, Anita Alvarez. Anita, how about the juvenile? You just referenced the juvenile court and some of the programs you have there. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in juvenile court?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel funny talking because you used to run our juvenile court, so you know it better than I think. But no, a lot of exciting things go on in juvenile court. And obviously there's the delinquency side for the kids who pick up, cases on the delinquency side. And then we also have the abuse and neglect side. And first, I'll touch on the delinquency side. If a youth is picked up and charged with, whatever it might be on the criminal side, the case comes into juvenile court. However, it gets screened first. We have experienced assistant state's attorneys who look at it, who determine whether or not it's a case that should proceed into the system, or to determine what exactly to do with the case. And the whole concept or theory that we operate under at juvenile court is balance and restorative justice, and that is really getting these kids diverted into the programs that will help them. And again, I always say, if we can reach them at that level and keep them away from 26th California, that's a good thing. If we can get the kids the services that they need, and balance and restorative justice is not just a diversion, because it's involving the victims of the crime, the community, and what can we do positively with these children to make sure that this is their only contact with the system, as opposed to ending up in the juvenile Department of Corrections. And then we also at the juvenile side, when we talk about servicing children and families, on the abuse and neglect side, we service children who sometimes are in a very abusive household, allegations of neglect, and that it's tough on either side, but I think the abuse and neglect side, some of the things that unfortunately we as prosecutors see, where children's lives are really put in jeopardy, but those cases, it's really a civil proceeding, not a criminal proceeding on the abuse and neglect side, and those cases again are handled to determine what's the best interest of the child. How do we proceed? Is the best interest of the child to try to work on getting them connected back with the family, or depending on the facts, maybe in the best interest of the child, it might be having to go into a foster home, or having to make a separation from the family. So it's really, I think, very intense, and obviously extremely important, especially when I think you try to keep families together as much as you can. but then sometimes, depending on the circumstances, maybe that's not the best for the child. So that's what we do over on the abuse and neglect side at juvenile court.
And we at Maryville provide homes for some of the children who come from juvenile court who are not able to live safely at home. So we see the effects of the abuse and neglect on them, but you have presented to the court the harm that's been done to the child, and the judge can then make a decision about where they should be. And I'm sure that you have to especially prepare your assistant state's attorneys both for the child abuse side and the delinquency side. And in a moment I'm going to ask you about how you prepare your state's attorneys, but another very heartrending area that I know you work in is domestic violence. Could you tell our viewers about the work of the state's attorney's office in domestic violence?
Domestic violence has always been a top priority for me. As a young assistant state's attorney, I was assigned to that courtroom. So I started early on in my career handling those cases, and the domestic violence cases are clearly, they involve so much more than other cases. You know, even though a battery charge the charge might be the same, but a domestic battery is not the same as a battery that happens in a bar. It just isn't. There's so much more connected with the family, and there's it's such sometimes substance abuse, mental health. There's all things going on. And we're quite happy that the courthouse, which is a newer courthouse on Harrison, so much nicer than where it used to be, and the facilities there are tremendous, particularly for the victims of domestic violence. We have started, and this had never been done before. We work closely, obviously, with the domestic violence advocates, and what I wanted to do was to train our assistant state's attorneys who get assigned to domestic violence court a special training, in addition to the regular training that you receive as an assistant state's attorney, and you receive it wherever you're at. With DV cases, domestic violence cases, you need a little more training. And so what we've implemented this past year and a half is what's called the 40-hour training. The 40-hour training is a specialized training that is that the advocates, domestic violence advocates, get. And so what we've done is we've brought that to our assistant state's attorneys and our investigators, and we are training all of our assistant state's attorneys and investigators, not just the ones that work in domestic violence court, but it's available for any other assistant or investigator to take. And so the 40-hour training has just been tremendous, because it allows the advocates to train, because sometimes the lawyer and the advocate don't see this eye to eye. And so what I've found is that with this training, there's more, I think, mutual respect from the advocates and the lawyers, because you really understand how complicated a domestic violence case can be. So we're quite happy. We were able to receive more grant money in order to create what we call a target abuser call, another target abuser call, TAC, we refer to it. And a TAC team within domestic violence basically is we try to identify offenders who are more likely to repeat. And every case is bad, but then there are some offenders where you've seen more and more arrests, particularly with the same victim. So on the target abuser call, we give it a little more attention and make sure that the victim gets everything that she needs. And we also have to deal with, a lot of times, victims who don't want to come forward, or they're afraid to come forward, and they don't want to go through. And so with our TAC team, there's a little special attention given to those victims and making sure that they get the services that they need. And so we were able to secure money to create another team, which is helpful for us. And so we're quite happy with the changes that we've made in domestic violence, because it's a top priority, because it touches all communities. It doesn't matter where you're from or what socioeconomic background you're from. It doesn't matter. It touches everyone, and sometimes people forget that. You know?
Well, I hope that our listeners are thinking about this. If you know someone who's been the victim of domestic violence, perhaps there's something you can do to help them. And Anita, what would be your advice if I'm a neighbor, a family member, and I think domestic violence is going on for someone in my family or my community? What would you suggest I do?
You know, I would go to the police. I would, be able to at least inform them, or come down to our office at 555 on Harrison and tell us about it. There's always someone there, and an advocate or a victim witness specialist that you can reach out to. That hopefully we can get the victim the services that they need.
Okay, thank you. One more time, I want to just show you our phone number for calling in on this program. If you want to talk to our Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez, the number is 312-738-1060. And Anita, I would like to, before I ask you about another program you've got, because obviously you've got many exciting programs going, and exciting, yes, but really important for our community. But how many assistant state's attorneys do you have in your office?
Right now we are approximately 850. And normally we would have 900 plus. Obviously, we are victims of the economic crisis as well, and budget cuts. So right now, about 850 is where we're at. Again, I think a lot of courtrooms we're operating with one assistant, and when there really should be 2 and 3. So, we're all kind of suffering right now as far as, and I think that's all over the place. It's not just us.
The times are tough.
Yeah.
But I think if a viewer is hearing this and may not be familiar with the work, the breadth of the work that you do, you are serving the courtrooms all over Cook County. Is that right? The city of Chicago and all the 100-some suburbs?
Yes, and Cook County, as we know, is quite a large county. So we have not only in the city of Chicago, we also are out in Rolling Meadows and Skokie, Maywood, Bridgeview, and Markham. So we are responsible for all of those courtrooms. So we are spread thin all over the place because it's not. We handle all the cases, the traffic cases, and the misdemeanor cases, and the felonies. Some prosecutors' office only handle felonies, but we handle everything.
So you actually have to be able to be present in every single courtroom in Cook County in order for the case to go forward.
Yes, we do.
Do you have an estimate of about how many cases your office handles in a year?
Oh,
I know it's many thousands.
It's thousands. It's 20,000. I'm not quite sure exactly. I don't want to give you the wrong number, but we have had so many cases come in, and we're doing our best to keep up with everything. Again, we think we're always asked to do more with less, and so we have been. But I'm happy that we've been able to kind of restructure our office to get essential services done, and I am very proud of the fact that we've reopened our community they were community prosecutions offices, but I've renamed them community justice centers, and those are community offices, and we've opened 3. Our 4th one is set to open at the end of the summer.
Really?
And that one's going to be centrally located around the UIC campus in that area. We have one in Oak Park, one on the south side, one on the north side of the city. And those have been going great because we've had great response from the community. In fact, I was hearing the complaints from the community when we closed them. And now that we've reopened, the communities are just so happy that they have a place to kind of walk in, and our assistants do so much within the community. For example, in our South Side office, 95th and Cottage, a big mortgage fraud case came out of the fact that a victim walked in with all of her paperwork. She was in foreclosure and came into our office, and we developed the case, and were able to charge this particular offender not only with 3 offenses, and she really, had she not come in, we probably wouldn't have been able to be successful with that. So the good thing about the mortgage fraud assistance is that we got a federal grant to create a new mortgage fraud unit.
Oh, really?
And part of that grant was that we had to have the assistants assigned out in the community. So it's all kind of coming together. So we have a mortgage fraud assistant in each community office, as well as some at 26th Street. But it really has opened our eyes to so many more victims, because with this economic crisis, particularly elderly, they're getting swindled out of their homes, and all the financial fraud that is going on. And that's where we've seen an increase in cases, the financial cases, the mortgage fraud. So it's nice having those assistants that they're developing a particular expertise in that area, and they're out in the communities, which really helps us.
So you're saying that your attorneys are in the communities, they're reviewing some of these cases that you said are diverted from court. They need to spend some time on those cases.
Sure.
And then they're also in the courtrooms prosecuting the cases that are brought.
Right.
So you take it from the very first complaint right through the process.
Right through the trial.
Now, I don't want time to pass without asking you about another initiative you have to protect children from human trafficking. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm quite excited about our human trafficking initiative, because when people talk about human trafficking, people always think it happens in other countries, right? And it doesn't happen here in the United States. And it does happen here in the United States, and it happens more than people want to believe that it happens. And it happens in Chicago. Chicago has been designated as a high intensity area for this type of crime, and the reason being because we're a convention center, we're a transportation hub, and so we're ripe for this kind of crime to exist. The Chicago Coalition for the Homeless estimates that approximately 6,000 children a year are at risk of being trafficked.
Really?
Because there are children out there who are homeless, children who come from broken families, and so they're at more of a higher risk to be trafficked. So what we did, we started to look at, number one, how we as prosecutors traditionally handle these types of cases, and we really haven't done a good job. Okay, we really haven't, and I think our approach just wasn't working. And so what we did, our first step was to rewrite the law, and we wrote the Illinois Safe Children's Act, and we passed it last year with one try. I'm really happy about that, because that doesn't always work down in Springfield, but we were able to pass it. And what the Illinois Safe Children's Act does, number one, when we're talking about the sex trafficking of children, you know, and I'm a mother of four, including 13-year-old girls, twins. And, you know, I always say, you know, 11, 12-year-old girl, if she's caught out there and brought into the system and charged with prostituting, she's not doing that on her own. There is somebody putting her up to that. There is somebody making money. There is somebody that's really victimizing her. So what this law does is, number one, we decriminalized juvenile prostitution. Took those words right out of the statute. Because what good does it do to take a 12-year-old girl and put her into the system on a juvenile prostitution case when the guy who's really running it and making the money, the adult, is getting away with it? Because traditionally we would just rely on her testimony to try to convict him. And, you know, that doesn't work for a lot of reasons. You know, sometimes this person is the only person that's providing somewhat for the child, and so they don't want to testify. So what we thought is we need to look and develop these cases differently. Develop them more like we develop a financial crimes case. So what this law gives us that we didn't have before was it gives us the opportunity to, there's stiffer fines and penalties for those that are the Johns and the pimps, forfeiture, but also it gives us the ability as prosecutors to go up on a wire on a trafficking case. And if you think about it, you know, we've always had the ability to go up on a wire for people selling drugs, but not for people selling children, and that doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
So this gives us that tool, and so we're able to go up on a wire in these types of crimes, and that allows us to really develop the case, not just fully relying on that victim. And so develop it like you would a financial crimes case, and hopefully we're going to be successful. We had our first conviction last month on one of our cases coming out of this new law.
Congratulations.
And hopefully we can help a lot of young girls and boys too who are put in this position, and really get the guy the bad guy who's making the money. And so I'm very excited. We were one of 3 jurisdictions in the nation to receive a grant in order to create the human trafficking program. So we were very happy with that. And then I was invited out to Washington, D.C. to testify at Senator Durbin's committee hearing on the human trafficking. So again, I think what we need to do is create more of awareness to everybody here that yes, it does happen, and it doesn't just happen in foreign lands.
Right, it happens here.
It happens here.
Well, I think our viewers can tell we need to invite you back because there's so much to tell about the People's Law Office.
Right.
The advocate for all of us. So thank you, Anita Alvarez, and we thank you for joining us this evening.